The pre-trib rapture is dead. Just saying that insults a lot of people. There are a lot of people, good, godly people, people who love God, love His Word, love His church, and love His people, would naturally feel offended by the statement. There are some discussions that are very difficult. You must admit that there are certain times when you must have a conversation and you know that it will be very unpleasant. Perhaps no discussion is more difficult than to tell someone that they are wrong. No one, let's be honest, no one likes being told that they were wrong. They don't like to have to admit it. They don't like to have to be told, and they really don't like having to admit that I was wrong. I'm able to say very confidently, ladies and gentlemen, that the pre-tribulation rapture theory has no biblical basis whatsoever. None. I'm going to present to you my case for this conclusion that I have drawn. I'm going to leave it to you as to whether you will continue to believe or whether you will abandon this rather hopeless position for a more biblical response to the question, what is the timing of the rapture of the church? I want you to notice first the certainty of those who have taught the pre-trib position for many, many years. First, I want you to notice Revelation 3:10. Because thou hast kept the word of my patience, I also will keep thee from the hour of temptation, which shall come upon all the world to try them that dwell upon the earth. This verse, Revelation 3:10, has been considered by many to be the most important verse to the support of the pre-tribulation rapture theory. In fact, I want you to notice what good men have said about this very verse. Please notice Dr. Robert H. Gundry, great Bible teacher, book writer. He says Revelation 3:10 is probably the most debated verse in the whole discussion about the time of the church's rapture. This is a sentence taken from his book that has not been challenged in the 35, 40 years it's been on the shelf. The book analyzed the debate, and he concluded that this single verse lies at the heart of the debate about the timing of the rapture. His statement in this regard is supported by the fact that many, many, many men also conclude this point. Would you notice Dr. Michael J. Spiegel, in his studies of all the rapture positions, drew this conclusion: the promise of protection in Revelation 3:10 is considered by many commentators to be the best exegetical proof of a pre-tribulational rapture of the church. Now, would you please notice he says that many commentators, writers, professors, scholars who deal with this subject will say that the best exegetical proof of a pre-tribulational rapture of the church is Revelation 3:10. Now, that is a powerful statement, particularly if you notice it says the best exegetical proof, meaning that there are no others, that this singularly focuses our attention to one verse in the New Testament. Now, that is a very powerful statement. Notice Dr. Lewis Sperry Chafer, founder of the Dallas Theological Seminary, he himself says the determining passage is Revelation 3:10. When it comes to the question of the timing of the rapture, the determining passage is Revelation 3:10. Again, I need you to pay very close attention to the fact that we are singularly focused. There are no passages. There is one passage, and that one passage is Revelation 3:10, and it alone is the determining passage. The exclusivity of Revelation 3:10 to this debate cannot be clearer in terms of these men and what they believe. Dr. Paul Feinberg, very fine scholar of past generation, he himself says the texts that expresses this promise are 1 Thessalonians 1:10 and 5:9 and Revelation 3:10. Now he casts a wider lariat that would include 2 verses from 1 Thessalonians. But please notice that Revelation 10 is among his list. Dr. David G. Winfrey, he himself added, if there is a proof text for the pre-tribulational position, it is Revelation 3:10. Although several of the texts used to support the pre-tribulational view have been abandoned by pre-tribulationists, Revelation 3:10 has remained the primary defense of the position. Now, let me quickly say that Dr. Winfrey has communicated to me that he would not say this today. This is something that he wrote a number of years ago. He has perhaps modified his position, and he would not draw this same conclusion today. I only include it because of the powerful statement that he made back then, and the fact that his statement is in line with the views of other godly men who have not modified their present position. But at the time that it was written, Dr. Winfrey believed that Revelation 3:10 was actually a proof text. Now, a proof text is a verse or a passage in the Bible that proves a particular conclusion. He said at that time, years ago, Revelation 3:10 is a proof text for the pre-tribulational position. There are others who would say it as well, and they have not modified their position. Notice Dr. Tim LaHaye. He says this promise, now he's referring to Revelation 3:10, this promise, however, is to the church of the Philadelphia. She will be raptured before that tribulation begins. It seems difficult to understand why some false teachers suggest that the church must go through the tribulation in view of this clear-cut statement of our Lord. Now, this is certainly a powerful and strong statement here. He says, in fact, that Revelation 3:10 is so clear and so powerful that anyone who denies it is a false teacher. Now, my friend, there perhaps is never a need for name calling among believers. We certainly should be gracious to each other. But Dr. LaHaye is emphatic that if you do not believe that Revelation 3:10 supports a pre-trib rapture explicitly, then he says you are a false teacher. Now that's pretty strong. That's pretty straightforward, unambiguous, and cannot be denied as to what Dr. LaHaye meant. Revelation 3:10 is it. And it is so powerful, so clear, that anyone denying it is a false teacher. Dr. Keith H. Essex, he himself writes, Revelation 3:10 through 11 is the only passage in Revelation to speak of the rapture. Now notice, out of the whole book, he did a study. He looked at all the supposed rapture passages in the book of Revelation, and he concluded that the only passage in the book of Revelation to speak of the rapture is in fact Revelation 3:10 and 11. Again, please notice the lack of ambiguity here. The man is emphatic in his assertion and his conclusion. Dr. Jeffrey Townsend is a pastor. He often spoke at Dallas Seminary. I remember hearing him speak in chapel when I was a student there. He himself, doing a study, he concluded equally sincere and devout students of the prophetic scriptures hold differing views on the time of the rapture of the church in relation to the tribulation. This is due in large measure to the fact that no verse of Scripture specifically states that relationship, but Revelation 3:10 comes close. Now, notice what he is saying here. He says that this is due in large measure to the fact that no verse of Scripture specifically states that relationship, that is, the relationship of the rapture of the church to the tribulation. But he says Revelation 3:10 comes close. And of course, close in horseshoes is very important. We'll see how important it is in the debate about the timing of the rapture. Would you please also notice Dr. John MacArthur Jr., he himself says, Revelation 3:10 states, this verse promises that the church will be delivered from the tribulation, thus supporting a pre-tribulation rapture. Now, of course, Dr. MacArthur here is not as dogmatic as others have been, but he himself is in agreement that Revelation 3:10 does in fact support a pre-trib rapture. Now, the nature of that support, I guess, we will have to discover. David Hawking, he himself says it is this one verse that gives the primary understanding of the pre-tribulational rapture of the church, close quote. So it is this one verse I want you to notice. David Hawkins says, it is this one, meaning there are no others, that this one verse is the primary significant support for a pre-trib rapture. Dr. David Jeremiah, pastor, president of college, very important preacher, notice what he says. This refers to the rapture. Now, he, of course, is talking about Revelation 3:10. This refers to the rapture, when Jesus will catch away God's people for himself. We are pre-tribulational in our beliefs, and we clearly see in this promise that the church will not go through the tribulation. How can the clarity of this promise be explained any other way? Now, my friend, there is no ambiguity here. There is no misunderstanding. There is no misstatement. Dr. Jeremiah is absolutely confident and dogmatic that Revelation 3:10 promises the church that it will not go through the tribulation, and that this verse is clear, unmistakable, unambiguous. There is no need for any discussion or debate. These are his own words. Dr. Robert L. Thomas, New Testament scholar and professor at the Master's College in California under John MacArthur, he says pre-tribulationists have often cited Revelation 3:10 as one of the strongest evidences for Christ's coming to remove the church before Daniel's 70th week. And rightly so. Yet the verse does not explicitly speak of the rapture so much as it tells of the church's preservation at a location away from the scene of earthly tribulation during that period. Doesn't explicitly speak of the rapture, but it indirectly promises and assures believers that they will not be involved in any shape, form, or fashion in that period known as Daniel's 70th week. All of that, he says, can be discerned from Revelation 3:10. Then a few years ago, we heard from Dr. John H. Niemela. He says, I no longer believe that Revelation 3:10 is a rapture passage, but it still has relevance to the rapture. That is, the subject of the verse is not the rapture, but a larger topic, one that includes the rapture. Now, this is a rather interesting development. This professor, who is a PhD graduate of Dallas Theological Seminary, has taught at Schaeffer Theological Seminary in California. He has taught and preached all over the United States and the world, I guess. Very able man, very educated, and a Greek scholar in terms of the language. This man knows the Greek language. He did an exhaustive study on Revelation 3:10, and as a result of his study in the Greek, he says that he no longer believes that Revelation 3:10 is a rapture passage. It deals with the rapture in terms of a larger topic, but it specifically in and of itself is not a rapture passage. Now, it's very important that you understand that Dr. Niemela is is still very much pre-tribulational, very strong adherent. But a study of this verse forced him to conclude that the verse has absolutely nothing to do with the rapture. Now, that is powerful, particularly given the men who spoke earlier who insist that Revelation 3:10 is the only verse that supports explicitly a pre-trib rapture. In fact, one man said that it was a proof text. Another man said it is the determining passage. The kind of language that men have used in the past to do two things. One, that Revelation 3:10 is the only passage that is proof text possible for pre-trib rapture, and that it promises clearly and unmistakably that believers will be pre-tribulationally raptured. That, ladies and gentlemen, brings us to quite a conundrum. If Revelation 3:10 is the only verse that is absolute proof of a pre-trib rapture, as argued by many, many men, but if it can be shown that this verse has absolutely nothing whatsoever to do with the rapture or the timing of the rapture, then the only conclusion that we can draw is that there are no passages that are explicit supporters of a pre-trib rapture. Now I want you to notice what Revelation 3:10 says. Indeed, I will make those of the synagogue of Satan, who say they are Jews and are not, but lie. Indeed, I will make them come and worship before your feet, and to know that I have loved you, because you have kept my command to persevere. I also will keep you from the hour of trial, which shall come upon the whole world to test those who dwell upon the earth. This is, of course, the New King James Version. I use it only because people are a little confused with the these and thous of the old King James. Now I want you to notice why Dr. Niemöller changed his mind. It was because of a rather exhaustive study of these two verses. And in his studies, as he looked intensely at the Greek text, he was forced to make a decision because of the excellence of his grammatical work. In the verse, the clause, because you have kept my command to persevere, that clause caused him some trouble. It caused him trouble because of how it was translated and punctuated in the verse. Now, I know that most of you just don't pay very much attention to the grammar, and you don't pay much attention to punctuation. You read for the truth of it. You don't really pay much attention to how the thing is constructed or put together. But in this verse, this phrase, because you have kept my command to persevere, there is debate and there is need for concern because of the way it was traditionally translated. But a look in the Greek proved that there was, in fact, a problem. We can see that when we pay closer attention and see that verse 10 also has the connective also. Because you have kept my command to persevere, I also will keep you from the hour of trial which shall come upon the whole world to test those who dwell upon the earth. Those two phrases, because you have kept my command to persevere, and the little connective also, caused Dr. Niemöller to change his view of Revelation 3:10. Why? Well, it's because of the way the Greek language works. The Greek language would suggest that the phrase, because you have kept my command to persevere, really should go with verse 9 and not verse 10. That verse 10 should begin a new sentence. I also will keep you from the hour of trial. This is another promise that God makes to the church at Philadelphia. But the critical phrase, because you have kept my commandment to persevere, period, should really go with verse 9. It is not the beginning of verse 10. This is the conclusion that Dr. Niemöller came up with as he looked at this verse intensely in the Greek language. Now, unfortunately, the discussion is rather technical. And as is so often the case, the extremely difficult and very technical matters that have to be decided upon in order to decide how to translate a verse is kept away from the average Bible reader. You simply read the results, and many times you don't know what the translators did or what decisions they made about how a particular verse would be translated. You simply read it and you understand it, you take what it says and you move along. But in back of the translation are many, many tough questions that the translators have to make in order to give you a good translation of the original Greek and Hebrew that our Bible was written in. The phrase, because you have kept my command to persevere, goes best with verse 9 and not verse 10. That's because even in English, now you need to know that noun clauses, clauses that are that begin with certain Greek words that indicate that they are clauses, adverbial clauses and noun clauses that modify different subjects and ideas, are structured a certain way in the New Testament in the main, just like in English. Now, normally, under normal circumstances, as in normal speak, a majority of the time, we would always put the because after the reason. In other words, we would give cause and effect. Normally we say, I am going to town because I need to buy some shoes. The reason I'm going to town is usually, normally, naturally stated after we say the what. I am going to town. Why? Because I need to buy a pair of shoes. Now, there are times and there are occasions when we will say, because I need to buy some shoes, I need to go to town. We do say it that way, and we'll put it that way for emphasis or to add, a little flavor and color to our speak. We would get tired of saying everything the exact same way all the time, which is why so many times in English we end up apocryphating things. We end up, producing slang phrases and clauses and statements just to add a little variety to what we're saying on a day-to-day basis. But there is a way that is more normal in terms of how we speak. And in English, we normally put the because phrase after the statement of what. I went to New York last week because I wanted to see a play. For emphasis, sometime I will say, because I want to see a play, I'm going to New York. In the Greek language, the normal way of speaking is to always put the because after the what. What I'm going to do, and then I tell you why. Now, there are more than 900 examples of this in the New Testament, and only 10 or 11 of them use the reverse order. Now, in this verse, the way it was originally translated, it looks as if the Greek writer decided to put it in reverse order. The because phrase comes before the what. And that's the way it's been traditionally translated. Because you have kept my command to persevere, I also will keep you. But Dr. Nimela, in his studies, and I wholeheartedly concur, that the choice of separating these verses 9 and 10, traditionally is incorrect. That this verse should have been translated the way it looks on the screen now. Indeed, I will make those of the synagogue of Satan who say that they are Jews and are not, but lie. Indeed, I will make them come and worship before your feet, and to know that I have loved you because you have kept my command to persevere. Period. I also will keep you from the hour of trial, which shall come upon the whole world to test those who dwell upon the earth. Second promise. When translated like this, which I believe is in fact the correct way that the verse should have been translated, the whole question and the whole debate about Revelation 3:10 becomes moot. The verse is clearly now communicating what I believe John intended. Would you please notice, ladies and gentlemen, this is the way the original Greek text looks. An author begins to write, and all the words are simply joined together. He comes to an end of a line, and he starts a new line. The first letter of the new line could be in the middle of a word, the end of a word, the beginning of a word. It depends on what he's writing and how wide the paper is that he was writing on, or the skin or the parchment or whatever the author was writing on. As you can see in this verse, there are no periods, there are no commas, there are no quotes, there are no quotation marks, there are no question marks, there are no exclamation points, there are no periods. How you would read it, you have to start at the very beginning. You understand what the first word is, and then you simply begin to read it based on the fact that you can recognize words and formation of certain words and endings and how words begin and how words end. Now, the average Jewish person 2,000 years ago could actually read an unpointed text. By unpointed, we mean no periods, no commas, no question marks, no capital letters, all small letters. The people knew how to read documents and to figure out what the author was saying without punctuation. Now, 2,000 years later, as we try to translate these documents, we have to make decisions. We have to make decisions about where sentences begin and where they end. We also have to make decisions about what is a question and what is an exclamation point and what is a quote and what is direct speech. I mean, there are all kinds of decisions that have to be made when you're translating it from Greek into English. And you need to know that scholars do not always agree on what is the best way to reflect the Greek language. If you know anything about translation and you know anything about the Bible, you know that there are many places in the Bible where the decision to make a chapter division or make a verse division was not the best place to do it. There are many of these. We know this. We simply, for the sake of, to cut down on confusion, we have continued to accept the chapter and verse divisions that were introduced back in the 1300s, even though we know that in many, many places the decision was poorly made. And usually as a pastor or a Bible teacher, as he is teaching, he will point out the fact that the decision to put a verse division here or there was poor, and he will explain why, and then he will show you where he believed the correct division should have been made. Revelation 3:10, I am absolutely 100% convinced, was incorrectly translated and punctuated, and the result of that incorrect procedure led to a doctrinal position that has absolutely no basis whatsoever. It is my belief that Revelation 3:10, 3:9, and 10 should look like this. Indeed, I will make those of the synagogue of Satan who say they are Jews and are not but lie, come and worship before your feet, and to know that I have loved you because you have kept my command to persevere, period. New verse. Also, I will keep you from the hour of trial which shall come upon the whole world to test those who dwell upon the earth. This is the correct way to render verse 9 and 10, and by so doing, it completely removes any discussion whatsoever of a pre-trib rapture. This is what Dr. Niemöller found. This is why he was forced to change his mind. And in the meantime, the pre-tribulationist position lost any support whatsoever in the biblical text. The pre-tribulation rapture theory has no biblical basis whatsoever. My friend, that is an incontrovertible conclusion, in my opinion. Because, if you remember, we were told that Revelation 3:10, because thou hast kept the word of my patience, I also will keep thee from the hour of temptation, which shall come upon all the world to try them that dwell upon the earth. What were we told? Louis Sperry Schaeffer said it was the determining passage. Wrong. Paul Feinberg said the text that expresses the promises are 1 Thessalonians 1:10 and 5:9 and Revelation 3:10. Wrong. Dr. George Winfrey, David Winfrey, what did he say? If there is a proof text for the pre-tribulation position, it is Revelation 3:10. Wrong. Dr. Tim LaHaye, this promise, however, to the church of Philadelphia, she will be raptured before the tribulation begins. It seems difficult to understand why some false teachers, wrong. He owes the church an apology, and he certainly owes Bible teachers an apology. Dr. Keith Essex, Revelation 3:10 is the only passage in Revelation to speak of the rapture. Wrong. Dr. Jeffrey L. Townsend, this is due in large measure to the fact that no verse of Scripture specifically states that the relationship, Revelation 3:10, come close. Wrong. Dr. John MacArthur Jr., Revelation 3:10 states, this verse promises that the church will be delivered from the tribulation, thus supporting a pre-tribulation rapture. Wrong. Dr. David Hawkins, wrong. Dr. David Jeremiah, how can the clarity of this promise be explained any other way? Well, now we know what way it can be explained, and he was wrong. Dr. Robert L. Thompson, wrong. We are left, ladies and gentlemen, with no other conclusion but that the pre-tribulational rapture theory has no biblical basis whatsoever. It only had one verse. By their own admission, pre-tribulational rapturists argued for more than 50 years that the only verse that proved a pre-tribulational rapture was Revelation 3:10. It was the only verse. That's what they said. Men and women who believed the pre-trib rapture and who taught it, they said themselves that there was only one verse. And that verse was Revelation 3:10. And now we discover that Revelation 3:10 is not a rapture passage at all, that it has nothing to do with the rapture of the church before Daniel's 70th week or before the tribulation began, that it does not support a pre-trib rapture explicitly in any shape, form, or fashion. Ultimately, in my opinion. Thus, the pre-tribulational rapture theory has no biblical basis whatsoever. Now, your decision to be pre-tribulational is certainly your decision, but you do so without an explicit biblical basis. In fact, you don't have one verse to support your position. Not one. 1 Thessalonians chapter 1 verse 10 and chapter 5 verse 9 promises that you will be taken off the earth before the wrath of God begins. It does not say that you will be taken off the earth before the wrath of Satan begins. Ladies and gentlemen, If you decide to remain or to continue to be pre-tribulational in your rapture timing position, you do so without one passage of scripture in the whole Bible to support your position. It really is your choice.